Welcome to the Long Take Review, a film podcast with one eye always on the Oscar race. I'm your host, Jen Subchakshai-Bankard, and I'm here with a host who would never throw other writers under the bus. It's PT McNiff. How's it going, PT?
There were no quotes from that monologue that I wanted to say. So I will just say, Happy New Year, Jen.
Happy New Year to you too. And I think that is a good call. I was, of course, referencing Joe Coy, the comedian who hosted the 81st Golden Globe Awards, which aired on CBS and Paramount Plus Sunday night. So we're recording this episode on Monday, January 8th. We've had about a full day to digest, browse the internet, see all the memes surrounding, dare I say, this train wreck of a broadcast. We'll get into it. We plan to share our reactions to the ceremony, which is what I'm referring to when I say train wreck, and the winners, as well as discuss the implications the results may have on the Oscar race. So, this is the big, flashy event that usually kicks off the Oscar season in full. And so we'll talk about sort of like what this means going forward in the rest of the season. So our discussion will be spoiler-free, or is intended to be spoiler-free. So you do not need to have seen any of the films that we're going to talk about today that were up for nomination. PT, if folks don't want to play us off the stage with music after listening to us today, what should they do?
If they don't want to miss new episodes of the show when they drop, please follow the Long Take Review wherever you get your podcasts. They host the feed on Jen's Substack, thelongtake.substack.com. You can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, wherever you may go and get your podcast. You can also follow us if you're more social media minded on Instagram and Threads at the Long Take Review.
All right. Thanks, PT. So to get started, I just want to give our general impressions of the ceremony. This is sort of like standard operating procedure for podcasts that react to the Golden Globes. Sort of like, what did you think about the show as a show? PT, what were your thoughts?
It was very bad. It was a bad show, but we'll get to the awards. I didn't mind the awards with kind of an overarching caveat. That's going to be a thing we talked about. So but awards, were generally good. As a show, it was not a particularly great way to spend 3 hours. And what do you? Well, I have some more thoughts, but what were your initial reactions, Jen?
So I had actually gotten my hopes up a little bit because I made the mistake of that morning going on YouTube and looking up sort of like press advertising the Golden Globes. And so there were a bunch of like morning shows that sort of, especially CBS, because that's the network that aired it. So it was like a bunch of like the CBS morning show or whatever had to like, here's what to expect from the Golden Globes this year. And they really did a good job of getting me hyped because they were like, yeah, we're like totally changing up the seating and the staging. We're trying to make it more intimate. There's actually going to be food. I know it's a big thing that actors have complained about in the past, is that there's alcohol, which very few people complain about, but that there's no food, which often makes for an entertaining combination, because then people get tipsy really quickly. But then they complain because they're like, I really could have used at least a snack during this 3-hour affair, right? So they were going to have Nobu sushi, and they had like these like lazy Susans, so like to have like a bar at each table, and I was like, this looks great, I'm excited. And then within like 2 minutes of the opening monologue, I was like, oh no, this is making so many of the mistakes of shows past, and maybe even more so. I thought that like I was really rooting for Joe Coy. Like I didn't really know him at all as a comedian, but I had read a little bit about him after they announced he was going to host, and I was like, oh cool, like I hope he does well. It's a tough job. It's a thankless job. No one seems to really want to do it, but it was tough. It was tough to watch, for sure.
It was a thankless job, and no one is thanking him for it. It was. What I've seen of Joe Coy, he's very funny, but this was not the context in which he can work. It was Jen sort of referenced it earlier, but he started the monologue. It wasn't going very well, and I get there's a sort of comedian, and some of my favorite, I think, about late night hosts who get self-referential about like, well, that joke didn't work, like Conan would do that. Seth Meyers does that a lot. And it's that can be really fun. But he was just throwing like, I didn't write that one, or like I didn't write all of these. They only hired me a few weeks ago. Like, what do you think? And it was just like, oh, okay. So then it became this sort of combative, like he's mad at the writers and he doesn't really want to be there. And then we didn't really want him to be there because he wasn't having fun and it wasn't funny. So yeah, that wasn't ideal. That wasn't ideal as a way to set things up. And then whatever flaws there were, I guess the positive for Joe Coy is whatever flaws there were in the external writers contributing to his monologue mostly carried forward into the introductions done by the presenters, which were not all bad, but pretty frequently unfunny or and or poorly executed. So, it was just I think about the people who I know in my life who are like, I do not like award shows and I don't find award shows entertaining, or I find them grating. I find them self-serving. This is very dumb. And it's like all of that was, everyone who felt that way would have felt completely justified in those thoughts by watching this. This was like the worst version of almost all of those things for all of the presentation parts, not necessarily the awards, and I wouldn't necessarily say the speeches, because I think there were a lot of really good speeches, but the award, the show around the awards was kind of a worst case scenario for something like this.
Agreed. And I think with the hosting in particular, because I put in our Google Doc, why do hosts keep failing? Because, I think Joe Coy is probably like we've hit kind of rock bottom in terms of just how quickly it went south and how hostile he got with the audience and how they were how little time they had for him and like how quickly everything fell apart. I think is like this is like a setting some kind of record, but there's a kind of a long history. I want to say going back to like Ricky Gervais, I feel like is the beginning of the end of the last time I have a memory of like a really cringy Golden Globes hosting situation. And so I kept wondering like why they keep failing. And my theory, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is like you can't go into this making fun of the people in the room. Like the jokes should not be at their expense. And I think this is why sort of like Jimmy Kimmel, I think, who's been hosting the Oscars, and people are like not thrilled with him, but generally accepting of him. He seems to kind of toe that line where he's like, but he's also kind of more in the in crowd. Like he's one of the people in the audience. He's friends with people in the industry. Whereas Joe Coy, I feel like had none of that kind of goodwill going into it. And so like when you come out of the gate, like making fun of the things that are being awarded, like I just feel like right now for award shows, that's just not the approach to take because people just like aren't going to be into it.
I agree. I feel like my memory is that first year that Ricky Gervais hosted, people were like, we like this. Not necessarily the folks in the room, although everyone there liked it enough that he was invited back, I think, 2 more times. But I think that there was like a general cultural reaction of like, oh, he like called people out to their face a little bit, and he made some jokes, that were pointed. And I think that there was a law of diminishing returns because there was a second and third year. He felt like he had to keep topping himself. And Ricky Gervais is also just sort of heading down this path of like, it actually is funny if you don't think I'm funny, which is a choice for a comedian to make, but that's a whole other thing. That's a different podcast. I kind of agree with what you're saying, but I want to tweak it a little bit. I don't think it's bad to make fun of the people who are there. I think making fun of the celebrities is welcome, except for Will Smith. He doesn't like that. But I think that for most people, they're just like, yeah, some good light roasting is fine. I think that there's a problem when hosts come out being like, this whole thing is dumb and it's dumb that we're doing this.
Right.
And again, I that kind of feels like it's trying to resonate and pick up those people like who I think about, who I've got plenty of friends who were just like, oh, I hate the Oscars. They're dumb. I hate all these award shows. And it seems like as we've moved away from the monoculture of network television where it's like the Academy Awards is going to be a big live event, and it would be like, yeah, I guess there's nothing else to do that Sunday or Monday night, so of course, 12 million people are going to tune in and watch it, or 20 million, however many it used to be. It was a pop cultural equivalent of the Super Bowl. But in the same way that the Indianapolis 500, like 50 years ago, was also a big television event. And now it's like, what? Like that, they do that still? Like that's a thing? That's kind of where the Academy Awards are going, where it's this sort of niche thing for people like us who are just movie nerds, or like pop culture nerds who want to see like Timothy Chalamet and Kylie Jenner because they've heard they've been dating, or Taylor Swift because, they like Taylor Swift. And that most people aren't going to be into it. And it feels like they keep trying to get hosts to try to straddle that line or bring in people by being like, this is so stupid, right? Like, isn't this so dumb that we're all here doing this? Like, don't we all agree this is like weird and outdated? And it's like, not really, because that's why we're here, is because we actually want to do this. So, I think that's why maybe it's like the individual hosts to a degree, but I think that it's partly the sort of buildup of the telecasts. And this is not just unique to the Golden Globes, obviously, like we're one eye on the Oscars, that it's, moving those awards that weren't going to be in the main ceremony out, trying to bring in the popular movie category to get the popular movie fans back. And the Academy Awards ceremony is like sometimes moved away from presenting things from the movies to be like more songs, more dances, more other like spectacle, when it's like, can't we just like be happy about movies and celebrate movies? And the people who don't like that aren't going to show up, and maybe that's only going to be 2 or 3 million people, and it's not a blockbuster thing, but that's still a live television event that's going to make you money. That's where it seems to be. That's where it seems to
Right.
be like dealt with.
Yeah, I'd love to see a monologue that just has like deep cut movie nerd jokes. Like the equivalent of like the Godfather or Snyder Cut references in Barbie. Like, you know what I mean? I feel like that's the level we should be pitching at this point. Um but I don't know. Do you feel like, cuz I had this thought periodically when there were presenters on that actually like clicked with me and I was into it. I was like, "Oh, why didn't they host this?" And famously, like I don't know, remember if this was Golden Globes, but Tina Fey and Amy Poehler, I feel like did a really good job. Whatever, they didn't host heavily; they just kind of popped in and out every once in a while. But I feel like they did a really really good job. And so were there presenters that you were kind of like, oh, why aren't they hosting?
Well, yes, there were, and I know what you think because we were texting during the show. So I'm not going to take the one that you felt the most strongest about, and I'll say, because I did feel a little bit stronger about this pairing, and it was Simu Liu and Issa Rae when they came out, and they had a nice bit about like representation and how they're excited about white person roles, which was all
Right.
just being a sad alcoholic in various contexts, and that was really funny. But it was like, oh, these two are funny, and they've got good chemistry. They've performed in comedies before, but they are also, they've got some serious acting chops as well. So they're I think that they would be respected as hosts. So those were sort of mine that stood out as like, yes, I would anoint them. Although I also feel like this is the path that got to James Franco and Anne Hathaway being
True.
hosting of the Oscars. So maybe it's not always the best idea to just pluck people who are good presenters. That said, who did you think would be the best potential
I
host?
I was a really big fan of Andra Day and John Baptiste. I feel like they actually seemed sort of happy to be there, unlike most of the other presenters. Um, and their riffing on video game music was just like so endearing and felt like really genuine, and like they were having like a little conversation with each other while they were up there, that you think that like I believed that they would have that conversation even if they weren't on the stage, which I think is the energy that you want to go for. So I really like them. I thought they were hilarious. And they just like they were actually laughing at each other in a way that was not staged, I felt like. So I thought they would have done a great job. I would have watched a whole show with them hosting. I also thought that Will Ferrell and Kristen Wiig were actually really good.
They are, but I also think that like I don't think they would be good as hosts. I think you need them for a pop because if they
Right.
had to do it the whole time, I don't think they would have that Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, like haha,
Right.
we're laughing, but like because I have that weekend update, like we're kind of guiding this ship. I think that would just be chaos, and it would like in the way that I think it might be good to have the Jean-Baptiste Andrew Day like hangout vibe and like but like that also could mean a 4-hour show if no one is like
Right. There's no
cutting
structure.
it off. I think that it would just be like super absurdist if it was Will Ferrell and Kristen Wiig,
Yeah.
which I think I would like, but I don't think that would be
I would like that, but I
appealing.
don't think that would be good for the show. Probably,
Right.
Just more broadly, yeah. You're right. Their shtick is like not particularly sustainable outside of one bit.
Now, what do you think about America Ferrera and Kevin Costner as just permanent hosts?
That would be tough. I mean, America Ferrera, she was really trying. She's like, we're gonna get through this. I'm gonna make sure. And then Kevin, what was Kevin Costner doing? Like
I zoned out because I was like, this can't be real. And I think I started looking up something on my phone to be like, wait, what exactly is that? And then it was still going. And so I don't know. It had a little bit of like the Mike Myers Kanye West from the Katrina relief vibes in America Ferrera's eyes, where she's just panicking of like, what is going on? But maybe that was supposed to be the bit. I also I saw some chatter online of someone who thought that Ray Romano was really like spiraling when he did his thing early on, and I forget who with whom he was paired. But I was like, no, I think it was Kerry Russell, right? It was Kerry Russell and Ray Romano, and I was like, no, that's a joke. Like that was the joke. Was like he gave her a compliment and she didn't have a compliment back in like true honesty.
Right. That seemed
written. They were like Ray Romano was like hitting rock bottom in that. And they like really thought that it was like a serious moment. So maybe that person was seeing that in the way that I saw Kevin Costner, and Kevin Costner thinks he did a really funny bit. And it came across
I don't know.
He was adult to me.
Yeah, for someone only half paying attention, I feel like you would be like, did he just have a stroke? Is he okay? Like, which I know is really mean, but like that was the thing. I was like, oh, Kevin Costner is old now.
Yeah.
And maybe he shouldn't be doing this. Like that's how far it went. So if that was all written as a part of the bit, then I don't think it worked.
Yeah. I'm hoping he was just a little like stoned or drunk, and not that he's addled.
Or it kind of sounded like he didn't quite understand in real time what he was supposed to be saying, and that was kind of messing with him. That I feel like that's also a possibility, because it's very likely that he had no idea what he was supposed to say until he was looking at the teleprompter.
Yes,
and then
he might have been, we'll do it live.
Yeah,
and didn't rehearse in any way.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense.
And why wouldn't he? He's Kevin Costner,
It's Kevin Costner.
Like he's busy making epic westerns. Apparently, did you hear about this?
Oh yeah, it's 2 or 3 movies. Plus, he's got all the Yellowstone stuff. Yeah, look, I'm down.
Well, no, so Yellowstone is done because he's like, peace. I'm gonna go make these movies now.
Yeah, and the first one comes out this summer, right? Or was supposed to.
Horizon.
I don't know. I'm into it. I'm down.
Yeah,
whatever.
I'll go see it. Okay, we probably should move on. So the other factor of this is, and most people kind of just tuning in to this year's Golden Globes probably would have no context for this because they really didn't make a big deal out of it. But the Globes has gone through massive revamping, rebranding. Just for some context for listeners, like basically the short version of it is there were a bunch of scandals. There was corruption that was exposed. The voting body for the Golden Globes, which used to be the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, the HFPA, they were sort of like disbanded. And it basically led to like boycotting. They didn't have a show one year. NBC was like, we're dropping you. And then this year, CBS was like, we will take you back, new Golden Globes. Like, we will start again.
It's a whole new body of people, right? Like, it's all new journalists. It's all a whole new organization, but it's owned by some weird parent company.
It's like a media company. Yeah.
Media company and like investment group have like bought the concept of the Golden Globes and it's the Golden Globes journalists instead of the Hollywood Foreign Press
Yeah.
Association, which was a memo that did not get to like 5 of the winners who still thanked the Hollywood Foreign Press Association.
Right. I think it was like Robert Downey Jr. and then maybe one or two other people sort of made a comment about the new Golden Globes and like the change, like kind of acknowledging the changes and stuff like that. But if you weren't kind of like paying attention to that, I feel like there would be no indication of like, we're here, we're new, which actually sort of surprised me. But maybe that was purposeful to be like, well, like, let's just not make a big deal out of it. Let's just start over and hopefully people will pick back up with us, right?
Yeah, like talking about how it's new necessitates being like, well, wait, why did it change? And then it's
Right.
like, well, there was sexual harassment and there was potentially bribery. Like there was all kinds of shadiness and like the kind of Hollywood shadiness that like isn't fun anymore and people don't really enjoy connecting with, which I think leads into part of the problem with like where's the ceremony, in the same way that I think there's a general award show like who is this for and what are we doing. I think the Globes in particular, in terms of constructing a television production of for giving out awards, is in this weird place of, well, everyone liked us because it was very loose and that like they had alcohol but no food, so people would get drunk, and like someone might be in the bathroom when their award comes up and who knows who's going to say what. And they like were still hinting at that, where they were like, Kerry Russell's a party animal, when she was like taking a selfie with someone. It was like, that's not whatever. That's not a party.
Right. You can't force or contrive spontaneity.
Right. Well, and it's also like all of that kind of like, we're just like letting our hair down and we're partying, like feels weird in the context of, and it was all like this kind of shady organization doing it. So then it's like, well, why are we keeping that? But then on the flip side, it was also, well, like, you know, the movie nominees are divided between musical and comedy on one hand and drama on the other. So more people win and more people are nominated. And there were always like weird nominations and sometimes weird winners because there were like under 100 people from barely existent journalistic organizations around the world that were part of this association, who would kind of vote based on who they liked the most or who had wined and dined them the most, or, you know, how many times Johnny Depp gave him a watch or something like that. And so it would be this sort of weird, like, oh, who knows what's going to happen? And now it kind of just feels like it's another in a line of like 8 ceremonies that are just trying to predict what the Oscars are going to do. And doesn't, you know, it just feels like sort of another critics group, but also sort of another like arm, you know, trying to predict what the arms of the Academy will do. And, you know, again, this is my caveat. I liked the awards that were given out in terms of, I'm happy for the movies that got honored, but it also sort of feels like maybe we just don't need the Globes anymore. Cause like, what are they for besides a night to be like, it's movie and it's TV and everyone's kind of there and hanging out, which is fine, I guess. But like, now that we have like, you know, SAG and the DGA and the PGA and BAFTA.
Right. We have many
like,
other precursor awards to go.
Yeah. What does this actually do besides have a legacy of having a TV show, a TV ceremony?
So you actually feel like there is a change, like this feels like a different voting body than the old Globes?
I think so. And part of that is that and now I don't have it readily available. I shouldn't have deleted the screenshot. But as I did text to you, I was looking to get ahead of ourselves slightly. Because I was like, oh, like Paul Giamatti won. And he, you know, in my mind, he won over Jeffrey Wright for Best Actor in a musical or comedy. I thought those were sort of the two people who were most likely to win. And then I was like, did Jeffrey Wright ever win a Golden Globe? And the answer is yes. He won one for Angels in America, the HBO production on the TV side. So, you know, it's like, okay, well, Jeffrey Wright's got a Golden Globe. Does Paul Giamatti have a Golden Globe? And the answer to that is also yes. He has 2, one of which is on the TV side for John Adams, and the other was for a movie called Barney's Version, which I've never heard of. But he won Best Actor in a Musical or Comedy. And the other nominees that year were Jake Gyllenhaal for Love and Other Drugs, a movie I'm vaguely aware exists. I don't know of anybody who's spoken highly of it. But okay, like that's good. Kevin Spacey for Casino Jack. Doesn't hold up, but that's, you know, whatever. That's tough. That's a tough look, because, you know, they didn't know, or at least it wasn't widely known. And the other 2 slots were both Johnny Depp for The Tourist and for Alice in Wonderland.
Oh, that's right. I remember that year, the double Johnny Depp.
So, like, looking at that, I was like, oh God, like the Golden Globes are so normal now. Like that, like nothing like that would have happened. And everyone would have just been like, why are we putting up with this if it did? Like, why would they revamp it and then get that weird and be like, it's Timothée Chalamet for Wonka and it's Timothée Chalamet for Dune Part 2. That didn't come out. I don't care. We're still nominating him. And we're putting that into musical or comedy. Like they, you know, that sort of weirdness isn't there. So I do think that they're, you know, again, they're sort of stuck, like trying to be more serious and respectful of the craft of it all, but also like then they're like, well, if you're not fun and weird,
Right.
then why?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Like, it seems like they're trying to have it both ways to become more legitimate, which makes sense considering their checkered past. But then also still maintain the reputation of being like, we're Hollywood's like funnest night, right? Or biggest party, or whatever the branding they used to have. I feel like there wasn't any of that kind of like spontaneous, wild and crazy partying thing at all. And in fact, I feel like there was very little opportunity for that because, as we were saying, a lot of the presenters were either worked or didn't work and had very heavily scripted bits, right? But then when it came to the speeches, I felt like they had so little time, and I acknowledge, like, the show as it was 3 hours, so I don't necessarily want it to be 4. So I get that we were operating under time constraints, but I feel like a lot of the speeches were cut so short that most people, by the time they were done thanking everybody and kind of collecting themselves, then the thing came up being like, wrap it up. So there wasn't as much opportunity for people to make those, like, have those big moments on stage. And then like the clips were super weird too, where like either there were no clips or there were clips that were way too long. Like, I think when they did Box Office Achievement, it had like tons of very long clips for like 8 movies, right? And then or the clips were edited together so quickly, and they weren't like what I thought would be representative scenes from the movie, because they kind of got weirdly cut off. So yeah, it's like the whole thing. There was very little that I was like, this seems great and better.
Yeah, the one that stood out to me was they did for the first time a best stand-up special, and it was 5 very famous comedians. I don't know if it's 5 comedians most people who follow stand-up comedy, which I'm not like right there, but I feel like I don't hear like, yes, these 5 legacy comedians are the 5 best right now. So that seemed sort of a weird selection. But then the clips they showed, I was like, I think like 2 of them didn't even have jokes. Like they were just setups and they hadn't gotten to any punchlines. And then they were like, next, and also this other person. So it seemed very odd. I don't know if maybe it's partially because Joe Coy set the tone at the beginning of all of this was rushed.
That it kind of threw everything off.
Yeah, and all of this was rushed and it all happened last minute, but like that made me feel like the clips were all edited in the last, like, since the new year. Like they all like came in January 2nd and were like, oh my God, no one's done the clips yet. Let's go. And like had to start working on it. But yeah,
maybe they fed the movies to AI and then said, put together a montage of scenes.
I wouldn't put it past anyone. Can I throw out, only because in my notes for myself, because this is a note I had as a tangent underneath, that this show would be boring if it just becomes an Oscar prediction engine. That, like, because it has TV as well, it could also be an Emmy prediction engine, which makes me want to note the funniest thing I think of this year is because of the strikes, the Emmys have been postponed, and they were sort of just left hanging in the air for a little while, I think, but they're going to be in a week or so. It's January 15th. At that Emmy show, because of the sort of time of eligibility plus the time shift, the things from The Bear that will be nominated are from season 1 of The Bear.
Right.
Every award that was handed out last night was for season 2.
Season 2, which I kept forgetting. Yeah, that was very confusing.
Very odd. Just an odd award show cluster of strangeness between like the rules of the different bodies plus the time shifts.
Yeah, For sure, for sure. Yeah, so I wonder how weird the Emmys will be kind of as a follow-up to this, because it
That's
is
a good
in
question.
such close succession. Our mutual friend Jordan, friend of the show, is
Hmm.
actually going to the Emmys.
Oh,
So
is
we'll
he?
maybe
Can he give
we'll
us a live
yeah,
report?
maybe we'll have him report back, or he can be our um what's the word, like,
Correspondent.
correspondent. Yeah, there we go. Um so if you're listening, Jordan, hit us up. Uh, One last thing about just the show, and then I do want to just go right into only talking about the awards and who won and all that stuff, because I think there's a lot more to talk about there, actually. But the last thing was, and I'm only sharing this because I went through the trouble of watching those like morning show promotional things. One of the things they bragged about was, yeah, the way we've set up the tables, we want people to like be bumping into each other and having to walk around to get to the stage. And by far one of the biggest complaints I've heard, aside from Joe Coy, is that it took forever for everybody to get to the stage.
Hmm.
And that generally made the whole thing longer, or like gave them less time for speeches, and all that sort of stuff. So I was like, oh, they thought that was a good thing.
Right.
That would generally kind of give to the, like, oh, we're like just a big party, right? We're not a formal award ceremony, because people are like, oh, hey, like I'm just bumping elbows as I'm walking up to the stage. But no, it actually just like took up a lot of time. Um, so
Which seems so obvious in retrospect, but I am sure whoever thought of that at the time was like, ah, this is gonna be killer. This is gonna be
yeah,
so great.
and the way they pitched it on that like news segment that I watched made it sound good. I was like, oh yeah, like that does sound fun. Like, no, yeah, we have to be practical is sort of the takeaway.
Or
Um,
they rented out the space and then they realized they can't fit all the people the way that they wanted to. So then they like retroactively were like, it's a good thing that everyone's walking into each other. Actually, we planned it that they wouldn't be able to get to the stage.
It's all about the narrative. So speaking of narratives, I want to talk about the winners and sort of like what were the big for you, the sort of bigger narratives of the evening in terms of who won, and what does this mean, or what trends did you notice, and all that sort of stuff.
Well, I mean, I guess we're starting with Succession, right? I mean, we have to know. Probably not a lot of talk on the TV side, although Jen's award prognostication advice of Succession, The Bear, and Beef was pretty strong. I think there's only one award on the TV side that wasn't won by those three shows. But yeah, I mean, look, the I kind of had a list of sort of like whose stock is up, whose stock is down, whose stock is holding. I don't know if it's stepping on toes to just kind of go through all of them real fast. But I mean, Oppenheimer, obviously the big winner,
Yeah,
literally won 5 awards, but also like really kind of solidified itself as not just the internet chatter, Nolan Bros, film Twitter front runner, but the actual for real, like no, everyone really likes this movie, and the people when people vote on it, it's it's popular, and the crowd responds to it. I do feel like the one of the first things that not to keep going back to it, but one of the first things in the monologue that like really lost people was when the Joe Coy was like, Oppenheimer, it was so long, and everyone was like, nah, we're not into it. Like, people talked about that like months ago, and also we love Oppenheimer, so keep its
also
name out of
Killers
your
of the
mouth.
Flower Moon
That really, to me, I
is
was like, oh,
later.
Killers of Flower Moons really disappeared in the conversation because they didn't even bother making jokes about it being half an hour longer than Oppenheimer. So yeah, Oppenheimer obviously up there. The holdovers kind of joining Poor Things as the main challengers to Oppenheimer's supremacy. I think was really big. Davine Joy Randolph winning was, she's been in the front running position in supporting actress for a while now. This just further seemed to lock her into that place. Until you hear otherwise, assume
Right.
she's winning every time, every ceremony,
And
every
what's
award.
funny is she has won so many critics awards compared to everybody else,
Mm-hmm.
that for her it felt like just confirmation, whereas with a lot of these other winners it felt like the start of something. You know what I mean? Like where people are like, oh, now this is where their campaign or their front runner status kicks off.
Yeah.
But for her, it was like, yep, check, keep going. She's got this.
Yeah, good. It was like the first one. It was like great, and she gave her, she's very great on the stage. People liked it. But yeah, by then Paul Giamatti winning again, as already talked about. And maybe this was a little bubble of film fan combined with academic corner, literary corner, was like American Fiction is on the move. Like people love that movie, but that doesn't seem to have happened. And so Paul Giamatti, and then it was like, oh yeah, like we do all love Paul Giamatti. That he got the second biggest response of the night in terms of ovations, in terms of vibes from the crowd about the performance, about the win, I should say, and the speech. So holdover stock way up. Anatomy of a Fall stock is way up from basically like flatline to having some life. Is suddenly like, yeah, maybe with the Barbie move, maybe this is now the front runner for original screenplay. Or at least is in the conversation for
Right.
that.
So we should clarify for listeners, because I don't think we've talked about this since the news broke, but Barbie had been campaigning for the Oscars in original screenplay, but it recently came out that they have now been placed in adapted screenplay, despite the campaigning or like saying like, oh, we want to be an original screenplay. The argument presumably being that it is based on a pre-existing IP. I think the precedent for this is the Lego movie, which is a similar thing where they were like, we want to be original. I mean, not that it really made it far enough to get nominated or anything, but we want to be original. But then the Academy decided, no, like you're based on a pre-existing product that everyone knows, so you have to be adapted. So there was a big upset, or there was a lot of discourse around that about people being mad about that. So interesting now that like it's cleared a path for Anatomy of a Fall potentially after this.
It felt like Barbie had a pretty solid argument for, well, if you're not going to give it any other above the line awards, you can give it original screenplay when it was campaigning an original. Not as competitive a category. Greta Gerwig, Noah Baumbach winning would be nice. Like people would be happy about that. But now it's up against sort of the heavy hitters of the year: Oppenheimer, Poor Things, Killers of the Flower Moon. So that's a lot tougher. So now original kind of feels like it's the holdovers and it's Anatomy of a Fall, and there are other movies in there that I can't immediately think of, but those are the two that feel
Past
like
Lives is the other big one, right?
Past Lives, of course.
That
my favorite. Past Lives
had more of an, before this potentially had more of an opportunity, and there's still time, I think, for Past Lives to pick up steam.
Sure.
A lot of people were like, oh, Past Lives is over, it went home empty-handed, but I think that's a little premature.
Yeah, and I think the headline of talking about stock going up and down is this, for all the things said before. This is, even though it's an expanded voting body, it's still only, is it a couple hundred people? Like it's not.
It went from 80, about 70 or 80 to 300.
Okay, so, and how many people are in the Academy? Like thousands, right?
Right, it's a lot. The Academy's way bigger, yeah.
And and this is still ultimately like a fancy gussied up critics award prize. Like these are still critics in whatever capacity they exist. So it's not necessarily reflective of, in the same way that if you watch the Producers Guild Awards, it's like, well, that's what people in the Producers Guild are going to vote. Or Screen Actors Guild, that's what the actors are going to vote. That's the biggest branch of the Academy. And the Directors Guild, the directors are going to vote a certain way. So this is still people outside the Academy. They have no direct voting influence on the ultimate Academy Awards. It's all vibes, and it's all sort of really a chance for the people who win at the Globes to sort of get up on stage and be like, wouldn't you want me to also give a speech at your award ceremony? And there were a lot of people who did that, and again, Robert Downey Jr., Lily Gladstone, Cillian Murphy, Paul Giamatti, who would be against Cillian Murphy, obviously, like really did sort of come across as like, oh man, yeah, like you'd want that, like you'd want that hit at the real ceremony, in the way that in earlier years, when it was Brad Pitt, when it was Laura Dern, when it was Ke Huy Quan, like those were like, you were getting excited about their speeches as audience members, and you could sort of feel like, oh, maybe voters are getting excited about the possibility as well.
Yeah, I think Lily Gladstone by far gave the best speech on that
Yeah.
front, and it really felt like, oh, this is she's seizing her moment here
Mm-hmm.
in a way that I think I didn't really. Robert Downey Jr. probably would be a close second because I thought his speech was quite good. It was funny. It was charming in a way that I would want a Robert Downey Jr. speech to be. Um, but I feel like her speech was actually very powerful. And one of the few, as I was talking about earlier, she actually had, and maybe this was because they didn't play her off, they just let her go because her speech did seem a little longer than
It
everyone
was.
else's, which is the right move, I think, because I think you don't want the headline the next day to be like Golden Globe silences Native American voices or something like that, right?
Right.
Like
Well,
the
and Michelle Yeoh had made the joke that she was going to beat up someone
that's right.
if they played over the best actor and actress's speeches.
Right. But I feel like she had the time and the space to actually say something meaningful about her movie, about the significance of her win, right? There was like a whole narrative that she managed to kind of craft in her speech, whereas a bunch of other people, like I enjoyed Davine Joy Randolph's speech as well, but I feel like hers was like 60% thanking people. And then at the end, she sort of snuck in a thing of like, there's a little bit of Mary in all of us, right? Like, but it wasn't, it didn't feel like it had the same gravitas that Lily Gladstone did.
Yeah, I agree with that. But yeah, it did feel like, I mean, the it seems like that race, the best actress race, is sort of boiling down to a two-person race. Best actor and best actress have gotten down to two people, and it's the two people who won, and that's part of the magic of the Globes, having drama and having musical or comedy. So for actress, it's Emma Stone and Lily Gladstone. In what feels like, we were texting about this, so I'm repeating myself to Jen, but not to our lovely listeners, which is that it really feels like a sort of twisted, somewhat mirror version of what happened last year, where there's the sort of person who is like, this is a career defining performance. This is absolutely incredible. Like, I cannot imagine in 20 years looking back and being like, this person has Oscars, but this wasn't what they won an Oscar for. Yet they have already won an Oscar, so maybe they don't need it. Versus someone else who would be a historical win in terms of representation, and is the cornerstone performance in this big movie of the year that had a big impact. I mean, in
Right.
slightly maybe different ways. And yeah, I feel like the inverse of it is that it's different which movie is the weird, like, are we sure the Academy likes this? This is so far out and bonkers. Movie is the like legacy actresses one, and then the sort of like more like stoic, serious movie about like important issues is the newcomers one. But I don't know. It feels like Lily Gladstone really has popular momentum. She's the one who had the biggest, like, if Paul Giamatti was second biggest, Lily Gladstone, it brought the house down, just winning. And then her speech was incredible, and everyone was like, seemed really locked into it. Like, that feels like she has the lead, which I feel like people have been doubting a little bit, because that's another category, not manipulation, I wouldn't say that, but just category movement of, is she going to be supporting? Is she going to be lead? And they clarified before the movie came out, she's going to be lead. And it was like, oof, is she going to be able to hold up there? And now it seems like, yes, like that's like the response is there for her. That movie, I believe, is hitting Apple TV Plus for free streaming Thursday or Friday.
Yes, I think you're right. I think it's this weekend.
So more people are going to start seeing it. They're potentially going to start seeing it in 4 or 5 installments, but that's fine. But I think that even if they cannot sit down and enjoy the movie as it was meant to be experienced in the daunting 3.5-hour single session, they will still be gripped by her performance in a similar way that I think one of the things that got people, and I'm maybe extrapolating out too much cognitive egocentricity here for me, but like, I remember I bought the 4K of Oppenheimer, watched it with family in town, and kind of suspected that maybe it would be like, okay, this won't hold up to what it was in the theater, because it was a huge screen, 70 millimeter IMAX, blah blah blah, and it's gangbusters. Like, it's still amazing at home. And I think Killers of the Flower Moon at least Lily Gladstone's performance, even if people might be shaky on the length and other aspects of it.
Right.
I think similarly, she's going to blow people away. And I think they're kind of there. They're just kind of in that pole position, going forward, barring something dramatically changing.
Yeah. To backtrack for a minute, I want to add to kind of the larger narrative because we've started getting kind of nitty gritty into individual wins, which I think is great. I want to keep doing that, but just to kind of like flag, what does this mean for Barbie? Because to give some context, my prediction strategy, which actually didn't pan out that well, I think I did better with TV than I did on the film side, which I think just means that I overthought the film side. Because I went through this roller coaster of like, well, the voting body is new. We can't actually use past the history or like who won in the past as like any sort of reference or what they tend to pick because it's a new group of people. And so I just kind of went with like who seemed to be in the lead for the general award season, like for the Oscars. And the thing I overestimated was Barbie, because my thought was, okay, like where I can pick Oppenheimer, I'll pick Oppenheimer. I think with the exception, I went with Charles Melton instead of Robert Downey Jr. because he's been winning so much stuff. So I was like, I guess
seemed right. That
yeah.
seemed right at the time.
Yeah. And now it seems weird that I did that. Because when Robert Downey Jr. got up there, it felt so right. Where it's like, oh, of course he's gonna win. Anyway, so that my Oppenheimer, go big on Oppenheimer strategy largely panned out. But I also kind of, where I could, like, especially with screenplay and then with best musical or comedy, I went big with Barbie also. I was like, let's do the whole Barbenheimer thing. I think that's what's going to dominate. And so only half worked because Oppenheimer, as you said, came away as the big winner of the night. But Barbie, I feel like, I don't know, because what this kind of told me was Barbie's a movie that is going to get lots of nominations because people are generally fans of it. But when it comes to it, when the like rubber hits the road, that people are going to be like, it's not prestige enough. That's sort of its performance at the Golden Globes. That's what it told me, because it ended up winning box office achievement, which I thought was going to go to Taylor Swift.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, oh, they're gonna give best comedy or musical to Barbie. That ended up going to Poor Things. And what that told me is like, oh, we're gonna choose the artier, weirder movie about a woman who's like a doll, rather than the more populist one. And so I feel like that was very telling. Whereas up until that point, because Barbie had been doing so well with critics groups and just like, it got the record number of nominations for Critics' Choice, right? It was really riding this big wave of like, could it? Like, can it be as big as Oppenheimer in terms of getting awards? And now I'm like, oh, I think it's going to be like more like a film like The Irishman that gets tons of nominations, or Mank or something like, like gets all the nominations, but then doesn't go home with anything.
Yeah, I mean, in the same way that it was like, oh, The Color Purple, I guess that's it, because it didn't get a lot of nominations for the Golden Globes. Barbie not getting a lot of wins for the Golden Globes with that musical or comedy lane, not all to itself, obviously, but being the most prominent movie, culturally and sort of hype wise, I think that does say something. And I think, I mean, I love Poor Things a lot, and was very glad to see it win. I've been happy with the idea of that sort of maybe being the spoiler from the big, long, serious movies, which I also love, of Killers of the Flower Moon, which isn't really in that position anymore, and Oppenheimer, which of course definitely is. But yeah, I had sort of been like, yeah, Barbie, they'll give it to Barbie because the Golden Globes. And that's another thing of like, I guess you're thinking more like the Oscars of, you being the Golden Globes, not you, Jen. That's like, you're thinking more like the Oscars of what's the sort of Oscar-y critical, correct choice, instead of the sort of, I don't want to say it would be a bizarre choice, but what's the fun choice, that would be, that I think would be Barbie. Yeah, it feels like, I don't think it's going to be An Irishman or a Mank, because I think it's going to win song. Like, I think it's got song locked up, and it's going to have 2 or 3 nominations. I think 2-time Academy Award winner Billie Eilish is in our near future, which is fine. That song is very good. I like that. It's no I'm Just Ken, but that's okay.
Condolences to Ryan Gosling, both for
I mean,
support.
he wouldn't win. He didn't write I'm Just Ken, so he wouldn't.
I know. I
Get
guess, condolences to Mark Ronson, I guess, technically.
right. He's fine, I think. But yes, it's and to Dua Lipa, who
right.
Well, her song will also not win. But I mean, that's why it kind of felt for a little while like, okay, we're starting to get the clusters of, I don't want to say condolence awards, but just sort of like, here's your corner. And like Killers of the Flower Moon, Lily Gladstone is their corner. Best Actress is the corner. I'm still holding out some, like, what about adapted screenplay? Is there going to be a push for that? I don't think that's likely, but I think that's going to, I think it'll get nominated.
Because you think Oppenheimer's going to win instead? Is that what you mean? Okay.
That's what I think. Or Poor Things.
Right.
Depending on how much of a, sort of spoiler that's going to be. Or that's where they're like, maybe we still award Barbie and we give it adapted screenplay. I just feel like Killers is just kind of like, hi, is just kind of hanging out in the background, and everyone's like, yeah, Lily Gladstone, you guys are fine. Which sort of feels like Banshees of Inisherin, where everyone was like, yeah, Colin Farrell, you guys are fine. And then he ended up not winning. So, who knows? But yeah, it felt like Barbie had a screenplay and a song kind of locked up. But now the screenplay is in flux because it moved. So maybe it's just going to be song. And then it's cool. It's still cool that Greta Gerwig's Barbie movie will be an Academy Award winning movie. But it does feel like it had some momentum for a little while. And now it doesn't.
Right. I mean, to counter my own argument, I would say one is their speech when they did accept, Margot Robbie and Greta Gerwig, when they did accept the Box Office Achievement Award, they really took it seriously, and they sort of left nothing on the table, I feel like, in terms of, and gave very good speeches. So I think in that sense, you could argue that because of that, Barbie is still in the game technically. Maybe it's not as strong as people thought before the Golden Globes, but that it's percolating, right? Like it still has potential. The other counter argument is that like that the Oscars, because people rioted when they tried to do a popular movie award, they don't have the equivalent of the box office achievement. So you could argue that a Golden Globes journalist voter could have said, hey, there's this other category, we can spread it around. I can put Poor Things in comedy and musical, and I can put Barbie in box office achievement, and then everybody goes home happy, right? Whereas with the Oscars, if they didn't have that choice, would people still pick Poor Things over Barbie or something like that, right?
Right. That's a good question.
So, yeah. But I think that's how Barbenheimer fared in general, I think, to me, is the biggest narrative or kind of biggest headline coming out of the Golden Globes.
Whose stock is falling for you? Who's I mean, no one's campaign is over. No one's trajectory is ended because of the Golden Globes, obviously. But in terms of buzz, in terms of momentum, who took it on the chin, so to speak?
I feel like American Fiction, like you said. I think if Jeffrey Wright had won and that was it, that I probably wouldn't be saying that. But the counter argument to that is, and this is the thing in my predictions that I think I had underestimated, because I had talked myself too much in being like, they're going to try to be like the Oscars. And I had kind of underplayed or didn't account for the international skewing. Because I think Anatomy of a Fall doing so well, it won in 2 different categories, right? Justine Triet gave 2 great speeches, and I think American Fiction, right? Americans in the title, right? By contrast, is maybe not something that's going to be on as many international voters' radars. Now, Past Lives, I think, is the thing that maybe is a little worrisome. As I said earlier, I think it's premature to like say that it's over for that film, right? But I think in theory that film also should have appealed to more international voters because of the nature of the story and how it's about like immigration and sort of like being kind of torn between 2 countries and stuff like that. You'd think that would have more in it. It was in the non-English language category, right? So the fact that it went home empty-handed and Anatomy of a Fall got 2, I think sort of shifts the balance of power.
But is the difference there that it's a body of foreign critics that lean European and not Asian.
Yeah, that's very
Like,
possible. I was
because
looking on the website. I didn't scroll through all the members because they have little bios and say which country they're from. It's actually did seem pretty diverse. Like it
okay,
wasn't
that's good.
just, but that might have been like I only made it through like the first 3 tabs. So maybe they front loaded all the
That's where they get
non-European.
you. It's just all Austrians for the last like 6 pages.
Right. Biggest stock down though. That was just all preamble for my real thing. Maestro, which I know you're happy about.
Happy is a strong word.
I'm not necessarily like happy about it. I actually feel really bad for Bradley Cooper. The look on his face when they announced that Cillian Murphy had won. Like, I think I saw a meme on the internet today that was like, insert montage of the 6 years of him learning how to conduct and putting everything into making Maestro, only to lose to Cillian Murphy. And I was just like, oh no, like it's gonna be Stars Born all over again. Like he has tried so hard, like will come away with nothing.
I mean, the important thing is that Cillian Murphy's name isn't Bradley Murphy, which would have just been an extra, like, in that, like, there was that little moment of Robert De Niro being like, huh? Oh. When they announced Robert Downey Jr., it was like, Robert Downey Jr., and he was like, oh, okay. But yeah, that's tough. Maybe we will, maybe we won't have a Maestro episode. Maybe I won't be on it, so you and Greg can talk about that movie positively, because I didn't particularly care for it.
I want you to have space to air your grievances.
Sure,
So.
but I also don't want to, like, I didn't think it was like some sort of crime against humanity. I just didn't think it was, particularly effective. I appreciated the things it was doing that were different than it wasn't a standard boring biopic. I appreciate
maybe you just don't like Bradley Cooper because you
don't
also don't like A Star Is Born.
true. Well, I wouldn't say I don't like A Star Is Born. I just didn't like it as much as everybody else. I feel like I enjoy Bradley Cooper's performances in things quite a bit. He's my favorite talking raccoon in major motion pictures.
There you go.
But yeah, I did not. Maestro is the only movie that has been in the conversation that I have seen that I generally do not want it to win. Like everything else, I'm just sort of like, am I going to be mad if May December, if Charles Melton had won over Robert Downey Jr., had won over Robert De Niro, it would have been like, oh man, but like, they were all good. Like that's great. But like if Bradley Cooper won over Cillian Murphy and Paul Giamatti, I would be like, come on, like what are we doing? What are we doing here? And I say that, I'd be glad he got his Oscar, but it would feel a little bit like this movie doesn't deserve it over these other movies. And again, there's a few movies I haven't seen. Maybe there are others that will come into those. I don't want to have a designated movie I hate or am rooting against. That I don't want that to be the case.
Right, you don't want there to be a villain for your award season.
I was texting anyone but Maestro every time there was a category where Maestro was nominated during the Golden Globes, which I believe that you reacted to generously at least once. Greg, who I think liked Maestro more than you did, remained pretty quiet. So my apologies to Greg for crap talking Maestro.
I don't want to speak for him, but I will anyway, apparently. It feels like he could be on the Bradley Cooper Best Director train. Not to win, but like to appreciate him as a director.
Sure.
I watched the Hollywood Reporter Directors Roundtable. I don't know if I told you this. Bradley Cooper wants to be known as a director so badly. So badly. Because everyone else at the table, and I think it was like Alexander Payne and Celine Song, it was a great lineup. Justine Triet, Michael Mann, and I feel like I'm forgetting one other person. But it was basically everyone who's a contender for Best Director except Christopher Nolan and Martin Scorsese. And it was like the Hollywood Reporter was trying to be like, hey, like maybe you want one of these people in
sure
in the category. And everyone kept trying to ask Bradley Cooper about what it was like to be an actor directing a movie, and he was just like, he just kept coming back with like, but I'm so in love with the process of filmmaking, and like even when I've been an actor, like he's really trying to undersell
the
The
acting.
fact that he's an actor, being a director. He just wants to be a director, known as a
Which is
director.
interesting because he was clearly working so hard as an actor during the movie.
It is very true.
But I'm sure if I did see, some of the clips of him and Emma Stone in the one-on-one actors talking to each other, and he was bringing up the directing components sometimes, but they were getting into it. So I think maybe it's just when I'm in the directors roundtable, I want to just talk about directing. When I'm in the actors one, I'll talk about the acting.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, he did a really great impression of Clint Eastwood, who was his mentor. So
I love that.
Yeah, so it's worth checking out. It was really great.
Yeah.
Also, Justine Triet. I fell in love with Justine Triet and Celine Song in that round table. I was just like, can't they be nominated? Like,
I mean,
because they're so smart. I think Justine Triet could be now.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, and if Past Lives, the thing with Past Lives is it felt like it, because of all the critics awards it's been getting, it felt like that was getting momentum. But maybe that will come back. Like, is there a world where it's Nolan and Scorsese, or Nolan and another dude, and then it's Greta Gerwig, Justine Triet, and Celine Song? I think that's possible. That's not impossible.
I mean, I like that you're putting that in the universe, but don't get my hopes up. That would be so fun.
I don't know if Scorsese and Yorgos Lanthimos both don't make it, but what if the big snub is Martin Scorsese is not nominated for director? Like, what if that's the big headline snub? But it means that like one of all three of those women get in, or another one of those women get in, and Cord Jefferson gets in, or whatever. It's probably Bradley Cooper.
So the other film that I think is big stock up, like is pretty solidified in my best picture lineup now, is The Holdovers, because it won 2 acting prizes at Golden Globes. Paul Giamatti, and they both gave great speeches. As I said, Davine's speech was like, to me, a little shortchanged. Not of no fault of her own, just that she didn't get enough time. By the time she finished thanking everybody and being really nice and gushing about the fact that she won. But Paul Giamatti, like, he thanked teachers. I was like, you're getting me where I live. Like, suddenly I was like, oh yes, like we need to make this happen. And so I feel like it's going to be hard if they both are sort of front runners or big contenders in the acting categories, and then Holdovers, because presumably Holdovers is getting in the screenplay too. Like, it can't be those 3 and then not get Best Picture. I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, I would be surprised. I'm sure anything is possible. I feel like if we combed back through the greater than 5 Best Picture nominations, there are some movies that got multiple acting nominations but didn't make it to Best Picture. But it seems very rare. At least it feels that way. I haven't done the history dive on that. Maybe that's something I'll do in between classes tomorrow to waste time. But yeah, I mean, that feels like, that is riding the wave of becoming available on free streaming or, subscription streaming. It's on Peacock.
Right.
At least anecdotally, a lot of people watched it once it hit there over right before Christmas and over sort of that week between Christmas and New Year's.
It went on Peacock after Christmas, which I thought was a poor choice.
Oh, that's interesting. But I still feel like I've heard a lot of people say they watched it.
Yeah. Like, I think it was like right around New Year's, I want to say.
Yeah, it's like this, maybe it was the 27th or 28th. Maybe that's right. But anyway, you're granted it should have been earlier, but I think that it's getting attention. People are suddenly like, oh yeah, like what a great little movie. Like, we really like that. And beyond the fact that Davine has just sort of, again, just had that nomination and seemingly win, like, on under control for a long time. There is like, it's like, yeah, Paul Giamatti. And I think that there's a degree to which, to going all the way back to just sort of like, what does this mean? What does this mean about the Golden Globes compared to the Oscars? And also sort of like, why does it exist? Is to be this first televised ceremony and to get celebrities up on the stage and talking, because I do feel like, there's the critics are off doing their critics things, and it's like, yes, it's Charles Melton, or yes, it's Andrew Scott, and it's Cillian Murphy, who's also very good on stage.
BAFTA long list came out the past week. Andrew Scott and All of Us Strangers did super well.
Yeah.
So now people are like, hey, All of Us Strangers, maybe that's back in it.
are we sure? Are we sure that BAFTA like? I feel like when it's like this is a English a British movie made with a bunch of British and Irish actors that people have a lot of connections with. It's not weird for it to like not overperform, but overperform compared to where it might be in the Oscars. But yeah, I think All of Us Strangers has only just come out. Like it's only just actually hitting more than like a handful of movie theaters in the country. So that may, have a chance to grow again. Or grow at all, maybe. But anyway, I feel like, there's this sort of, these sort of if there are ceremonies, they're not broadcast. We don't know like where they are. It's suddenly like, who are we kidding? Like, we want Robert Downey Jr. to win. Look at the speech he's going to give. Like, we want Paul Giamatti to win. Look, like, everyone loves Paul Giamatti. Like, of course, like, this is great. It's Paul Giamatti. And so he gets up and he gives his speech and everyone's clapping. And, I think that he had sort of, I think one time recently we were talking about it. I think we were like, he might not even get in. He might not even get a nomination. And now it feels like, I don't think he's the front runner, but I think he's the spoiler. It's a head to head and he's the second person in the ring.
Yeah. I didn't even have him in my nominations predictions originally. Now I'm going to put him back in. Yeah, I don't know who comes out of what I have, but we'll have to see.
It's Bradley Cooper. No. So he just has to be sad. So who, I feel so bad. I mean, maybe it's Leo. Like maybe it's just like, okay.
I've been saying Leo might not get in for a long time. Richard Lawson of Vanity Fair made a really good point where people don't want to vote for Ernest.
Sure.
Like his character is so icky that people aren't going to be like, yes.
Yeah.
And then if we have all the attention on Lily Gladstone anyway, and people like you were saying earlier, people are like, oh, it's definitely going to get Best Actress. So we've got killers covered. Right. I feel like it's much less likely Leo makes it in.
I'm just looking at the Globe nominees, and a bunch of the musical or comedy is like, okay, that's not relevant, but
they're fun. They're fun nominations, but they're not going to translate to Oscars.
But really, outside of Cillian Murphy, everyone's potentially fungible. And I don't mean that in terms of talent or performance. I just mean like
snubbable, I guess.
Yeah, would I be surprised? At any of these: Bradley Cooper, Leonardo DiCaprio, Andrew Scott, Paul Giamatti, Jeffrey Wright. After now, Coleman Domingo has been creeping for a long time, but it doesn't seem like anyone's really talking about Rustin anymore. Even though he did do a great job in that movie, and deserved a better movie around him. That's my capsule review. But yeah, that's I feel like any one of those being left out. I think anyone but Cillian being left out, it would be like, ooh, wow. But okay, it would be weird if they all get left out and then Joaquin Phoenix for Beau is Afraid or Napoleon gets put in. But, that's 6 people. Any of those, one of them has to not be in. So, any one of them.
So maybe it's no Andrew Scott, no Leo, or no Andrew Scott, no Coleman Domingo.
Or no Jeffrey Wright.
Or no Jeff.
Which would suck. I want Jeffrey Wright. He needs it. And I think that they gotta focus their campaign for that movie on that and adapted screenplay. I forgot that one earlier.
I've heard a lot of critics saying that the release plan for American Fiction was sort of not ideal.
Yes,
that sort of came out at the wrong time and now is fading away.
It's another in a line of what used to be the way of there'd be 1 or 2 big movies that came out Christmas Day, and that would become a huge contender. Is kind of no more because American Fiction. I mean, I think they came out like a little bit before, but American Fiction, Color Purple, Ferrari. None of those are really like getting the momentum that it seemed like people thought they would, to whatever degrees they might be based on the quality of the movie, but that the release strategy is, yes, as you say, just not helping.
So I cannot believe that this hasn't come up yet, but there's one big sort of surprise of the evening that we have not yet discussed, and that is Best Animated Feature. Yes. Which went to The Boy and the Heron.
You're damn right.
Not Haran. And
look.
Sorry, I'm not over that yet. And not Spider-Verse.
Not Spider-Verse.
Everyone, every critic I follow, every podcast I listen to, every website, there maybe it was like one or two people who were like, I'm going against the grain and picking The Boy and the Heron. but pretty much everybody had the consensus that it was going to be Spider-Verse. So this was a big surprise.
And it was the first time that I really believed what some people have said. I believe that Greg has been one of them, where it was like, are we underestimating the degree to which people were like, Spider-Verse didn't feel like a complete movie,
Right.
because it ended
is a sequel and is also not finished. Yeah.
Yes, it has the Two Towers syndrome,
Yeah.
the Avatar Way of Water thing of, we're just in the middle of this story. We liked and rewarded the first one. Let's wait for the third one to make sure that you land the plane. We can award it then. But for now, we can go and do something else. And look, I have no choice but to stand. I am here for it. I love this. I want this out in the world. I would love Miyazaki to get another Academy Award. I would love Joe Hisashi, and I'm not certain I'm saying that correctly, to at least get a score nomination. I don't know if he has a chance to win, but he was nominated for score at the Globes, and that would be great. Let's do it. Why not? Let's let that weird little movie win an Academy Award.
It's not little, but I know what you mean.
Right. I mean, it may be little compared to Spider-Verse in terms of scope of story, but it's not little in terms of man hours put into it and box office success and cultural significance. But yeah, that was great. Florence Pugh seemed very excited, and maybe that's because she does a voice in the dubbed version. But I also like to think that she just respects the film history of Hayao Miyazaki and was happy to see it win. And again, to my hopeful defense of Past Lives by saying that the critics of the Golden Globes lean too European, that they are not as into Asian stories, somewhat undermined by The Boy and the Heron.
True.
Being the first Japanese animated movie to win at the Golden Globes, to win that category at the Golden Globes. So, but yeah, lovely. What a wonderful win for
and who knows
all.
what if it will mean anything going forward necessarily, because I think I've heard a lot of people already sort of couching it as, well, but this is like the Golden Globes. Of course, they were going to pick like the more international animated feature, or the less linear, artsier, less commercial pick, right? Although you just mentioned like Boy and the Heron had great box office showing, so I don't know if we can even say that it's not commercially viable, right?
I think that people maybe, or I always feel like I have underestimated the degree to which anime is a dominant popular culture force for a lot of people under the age of 25 or 30. And so I don't know if, again, I always kind of think of Miyazaki movies as these weird dream sequence, like barely linear stories of, weird things. But like, I don't know if that's weird for a lot of people. And the Academy has been embracing more, non-linear, more, sort of out there narrative approaches. And Miyazaki has moved. He's generationally become like the revered old master for many, many people. We've got 30 years of people who have grown up on his movies. So I don't. It seemed like a pipe dream, and maybe we'll go back to just Spider-Verse winning, which, oh shucks, my number 10 movie of the year will be best animated instead of my number 5 or 6 movie of the year. But it's a wonderful problem to have. But I'm happy. I'm happy for this. Did you see the statement from Studio Ghibli that was like, it's been very hard in Japan for the first week of the year because there have been so many tragedies. This was a small light in a terrible time.
Oh.
And it was like, that's a perfect, like, that feels like a Miyazaki movie to be like, oh, you took a moment of joy and somehow made it like crushingly emotional. Like, great. Good job.
I did not see that. So that's good. Yeah, because I think a lot of people were sort of just observing, or in some cases complaining that no one was there to accept the award. But to be fair, no one is expecting it. So I'm like,
right.
Yeah. It's a big.
Get Taylor Swift up. Get Taylor Swift up to accept it. She's Heron-ish.
I'm just gonna leave that there. So yeah, I mean, obviously, like, I love both The Boy and the Heron and Spider-Verse. I'm not mad either way, probably, but I do think, Into the Spider-Verse already won an Oscar, right?
True. True.
So like if that's gonna nudge me a little bit more to rooting for The Boy and the Heron, I think. But yeah, really was this was the one where I was generally surprised. And happy to be incorrectly predicting it.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't have guessed it at all. But yeah, we'll see. I'm also just happy that there's a race now. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
the fact that it's like up in the air between these two films because of this, I think is much more fun than if people were just like, yeah, it's Spider-Verse, whatever.
Well, and that's one of the, to start to move out. Maybe I feel like on our planning sheet, we've answered a lot of the questions, or I've been trying to do the timestamp, and I'm like, we kind of talked about these out of order.
Yeah, we're chipping around.
That's okay. But to start to zone out a little bit of like larger meta narratives, whether this is a problem or not, for this year, it may be something to consider for the awards ceremony cycle over multiple years. Is this going to be another year where kind of will feel like from maybe like early February for like the last like 5 weeks? Is it just going to be like, we all know who's going to win basically everything? And that feels like it's happened more and more, partially because all these precursors got TV deals, and that was sort of, to fill gaps that, the Golden Globes kind of opened a void, and they people got set up there, whatever. And also the awards industrial complex, of which we are our own little small component of, is out there. But it does sort of, is it possible? It does feel like the acting races are all down to one or two people, and picture and director feel like pretty close to locked in. Like nothing's done. No one has sewn anything up, just as no one has lost their campaign. But it does feel like there's a lot of momentum in one direction. So having something like Best Animated Feature suddenly be thrown into chaos is pretty fun.
Yeah. To go back to Best Director, because I think we haven't really talked about that in terms of what happened to the Golden Globes. I feel like Christopher Nolan did exactly what he needed to do, right? Invoking Heath Ledger, and then between him and Cillian Murphy, I feel like there was a lot of good tag teaming, propping up like each other's campaigns in the speeches, right? Because Cillian Murphy really talked a lot about Christopher Nolan and how he's worked with him for so long, and that his process, like from the moment he arrived on set and saw there were no places for actors to sit, meant that this was like a serious, rigorous production, and that Christopher Nolan doesn't mess around. And then similarly, Christopher Nolan was like, to Cillian Murphy, sort of my partner in crime for like 20 years, and then talked about kind of the last time he was on the stage accepting a posthumous award for Heath Ledger, right, for The Dark Knight. And so like I don't know, I just feel like they took advantage of the wins here and gave themselves that sort of boost. Now the question is, does that turn into actual Oscars momentum? Or, as we often see, maybe not this late in the season, but oftentimes the front runner. So in recent years, I feel like it was Power of the Dog. And I mean, to a certain extent, Fabelmans, though I think Fabelmans sort of faded out much earlier in the season than now. But oftentimes a film that comes out as an early frontrunner, and actually Fabelmans won a bunch of Golden Globes, I think, so maybe that is a count. That becomes sort of like a movie with a target on its back, and then there's an underdog. You would probably say Poor Things or something like that.
Or the Holdovers
comes up, or the Holdovers, yeah.
Well, what I would say is, instead of the Fable, and I don't know if this is, in a way witch casting it, I kind of feel like Oppenheimer's more with Everything Everywhere All at Once, in that it was like, it didn't come out as early as Everything Everywhere, but it was like, this was a movie that was very popular. It made a lot of money relative to its expectations, relative to the box office as it exists the year in which it came out. It was like, wow, that was actually really successful. And the biggest sort of backlash against it was like, the people who love that movie really love it, and I kind of find that annoying. I don't mean I find that annoying, because I'm one of those people who love both of those movies, but that there isn't a lot of people who push back on Everything Everywhere is like, it's actually not very good, or Oppenheimer, as it's actually not very good. It was more like, calm down, everybody. Like, maybe this isn't as great as you think it is. There are these other movies that are also really good. And there are other movies that are also really good, but like, these are both really loved movies. So it's like, I think it might be sort of like Everything Everywhere, where, or, this is a strange comparison. It feels like it's maybe one of those presidential campaign things. And we're not talking about current ones, but like a decade ago, before things went really off the rails, when it would be like, to pull a name, it's like Mitt Romney's the person who's going to be the Republican nominee. And like a bunch of primary voters were like, we don't like that. What if it's Herman Cain? What if it's Rick Perry? What if it's, and like someone would kind of like brew up to be like, maybe I'm the front runner. And it's like, no, you're not. Like, you're actually not. Go away. And it was just the guy that we knew all along was going to do it, did it. I kind of feel like that's where Oppenheimer is it's just like, yeah, like, and it's not that Oppenheimer can't, be beaten or anything like that. But I just think everyone kind of got sick of thinking it was the favorite, and they were like, maybe something else is the favorite now. But it's just sort of always been there as like, yeah, everyone liked it. It's kind of feels like the movie of the year. It's got the like in the broadest appeal in terms of Academy voters. What are we talking about? Or what, like, why are we really kind of debating this? And I may be wrong. I may be proven wrong, and something could go, off in a whole different direction. But yeah, I will just, to reiterate what you said, that it was, going into this, the award, it felt pretty likely that Oppenheimer would win best film, best dramatic film. But best director all along, all sort of the run, that's been in the same wheel. There's maybe another version, another timeline where Christopher Nolan's going to get best director, and that's the Oppenheimer award. And Killers of the Flower Moon or Poor Things or whatever is cleaning up 5, 6, 7 awards in other categories at all these different precursors. So Christopher Nolan's speech being, I had this connection with Robert Downey Jr. the last time I was on the stage. I'm talking about Heath Ledger. I looked at Robert Downey Jr. That was really important to me. Robert Downey Jr. is really important. Think about Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah.
in a context where Robert Downey Jr. may not have won. Like, that speech was written not knowing that he was going to win, and that Cillian Murphy might not win. So let's talk about Cillian Murphy and me, like you were saying. So it kind of feels like they're really pulling together, in a way, these 4 awards of supporting actor, director, and picture. And since I did do this, do you want to know the last time that there was a movie that won supporting actor, best director, and best picture?
Oh my goodness.
It's further back than you think. Like, you can't go back year by year.
Oh, okay. So it's not recent?
No. We were not alive when this happened.
Oh, that makes it harder, actually.
Well, I didn't actually mean this to be the trivia question.
Okay.
The answer is Ben-Hur in 1959, which obviously won a lot of awards. It was, and now, of course, of all the things that I looked up, I didn't write down. It's Charlton Heston won Best Actor. Hugh Griffith won Best Actor in a Supporting Role. And I have to confess that I've never seen Ben-Hur, so I don't know who Hugh Griffith played or whether he deserved it.
I've seen it, but it was so long ago that I don't think I could tell you.
But yeah, and then William Wyler, director, Best Picture. And so the actual trivia question that I was going to ask, because that felt too hard to actually ask you that. Although I will note that another thing I'll note is that there's only been 2 times this century that the Best Actor and Best Supporting Actor have been from the same movie, and neither won director or picture. And it was Mystic River with Sean Penn and Tim Robbins in 2003, and Dallas Buyers Club with Matthew McConaughey and Jared Leto in 2013. So maybe 2023 we'll have Oppenheimer. So we've got a little random, totally unrelated, but still fun to see pattern. Ben-Hur, the movie that did have those 4 all win, won a bunch of other awards. It won 11 total awards. That is tied with 2 other movies as the most awards ever won in one night. Jen, what are the other 2 movies that have won
my goodness
11 awards? These 2 you should know. Or you will, if you don't think of them, you'll be like, I should have thought of this.
Right. Okay. So...
And they are from our lifetime. And I believe both of our Academy Award watching lives. Like, we were
Plugged into the
watching the
Oscars for
awards.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
we were aware of them. We were old enough to be aware. I was plugged in for both of them. I can't speak to you for both.
Wait, so it's like, are we talking past 5 years for either of them? Okay.
No, no.
So
We were double digit years old, both of us, when it happened.
okay, fair enough. That
happened within 6 years of each other. That's the hint I'll give you.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And I believe you, another, I don't know if it's a hint. I know you like one of them. I believe you like both of these movies.
Okay. I'm going to guess The Return of the King.
That is correct.
For
Return
one of
the King.
Yes, because I remember that was that did really well
Yes.
that year. The other one I'll say, because that's probably the one you were like, oh, that's one that I like.
Yeah, for sure. I could lock that one in.
So then what does that mean for the other one? The other one is probably... Is the other one earlier than Return of the King?
It is earlier. That was the next hint I was going to give you. It was earlier.
Okay. So...
It is not surprising that this movie is on this list.
Okay.
Like, you won't be like, oh, who would have thought of that?
Right. Yeah. Is it... Oh, no. I'm trying to think... Oh, Titanic?
It is Titanic.
Yes.
I was going to say, next hint was, who do you never bet against? Who should one never bet against? And it's James Cameron. He's king of the world.
Big Jim, as they call him on The Big Pick.
Indeed. So anyway, yeah, it would be historic if they carry forward, which seems, very possible. I feel like, best supporting actor, again, nothing's locked in, but Robert Downey Jr. feels heavily in the lead now.
Yeah,
after
really,
it felt
seriously.
like Charles Melton had kind of secured a slight lead. It seems like RDJ is just like, what are we doing? Like, everyone wants to give him an award. And
so now I think the early momentum for Charles Melton translates into a nomination, and that's what that's going to do for him.
Yeah.
But now the idea that he's winning seems like sort of absurd now.
Right.
But Robert Downey Jr. when he got up there, for him and Cillian Murphy. And I want to say Christopher Nolan, though I think Christopher Nolan was such a much more sure bet going into the night. It felt like one of those things where people were like, well, it feels like they would win, but we don't have any information with which to really say that. And now we do, and that honestly, in the awards, its role in the award season, which you keep kind of coming back to, I feel like the first big data point is really... whether or not that's like predictive of the Oscars or just like a thing to shake up award season with who wins, that's sort of what the Golden Globes is to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
which is interesting because it's very unclear if there is a line to draw from this, like that moment of seeing those people on stage to affecting anyone's votes in any of these things that actually, in any way that actually matters. But yes, as people who watch this and construct our little narratives of what is happening, it certainly feels like it's like, oh, what were we doing? Why were we ever thinking that all these Oppenheimer people wouldn't just be doing this? Like, this totally makes sense. And you needed those two actors. Of course you needed the director. Of course it's the picture. Like, you need all of those. And how they don't have as many below the line, but it did win score as well, right? Which it feels firmly in the lead. It feels like
score, editing, cinematography, a lot of those. It's a real
production
possibility.
Design.
It's out for visual effects.
Crazy,
because it didn't make the short list.
Yeah,
bananas.
Wild. I mean, have you not seen the video of Christopher Nolan spinning the thing in Cillian Murphy's face when he has the 10,000 pound IMAX camera on his nose? That's why his nose was red. It wasn't lipstick. It was the IMAX camera pressed into his face when he's trying to sleep. That was dumb.
It's a scar from that. So it sounds like Oppenheimer's not going anywhere.
I mean,
anything could happen. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, it is so strong right now. This is confirmation of that, or like a sort of coronation of that, where it's like, oh, the thing that we thought was just theoretical and imaginary, it's like Schrodinger's Oscar.
Right.
Right now it's a real tangible concrete thing that we can say is happening. Was there, we have a whole slew of other precursors between now and March when the Oscars air. SAG, BAFTA, PGA, DGA, WGA is actually postponed, so that will be after the Oscars.
That's right.
So that one's not in the running, but that's a lot. Is there something that gets for one of those other bodies, voting bodies, kind of shakes this up a little bit?
It could be. I did just check. The USC Scripture Awards will still be happening in early March,
so
but it will be after the voting. It will be after the voting for the Oscars. So I don't know, but it will give us a little something to nibble on.
Sure.
While we're waiting, it's like 10 days before the Oscars.
It'll be a bellwether, but not a precursor in the momentum sense. Yeah.
Right. Or yes, in the momentum that actually matters, which is who votes for what. Yeah. I mean, I don't. Again, it would be boring if everything just sort of stays the same. So I hope there's some sort of a shakeup. That's also easy enough to say in a year where there's a lot of good movies in the running. There's no, there's no movie where it's just like, oh dear God, like please don't let this movie win. I lightly feel that way towards Maestro, but like, would I really be mad at I mean, I would be mad if one director in picture, for sure, I would lose my mind. But like, Cooper acting, Mulligan actress, like fine. Like, okay.
So the craziest thing is that up until the Golden Globes, Carey Mulligan was like in people's number 2, in some people's number 1, and now she's not even in the conversation for some people, which to me seems too drastic. Like people are like, oh, maybe Carey Mulligan doesn't even get nominated now. And it's like, well, I don't know about that. Like,
yeah,
like her performance is pretty flashy and good and big, like regardless of how you feel about the movie, like, so I think maybe she's dropped down a little bit. She's not maybe as solidly in third behind Lily Gladstone, Emma Stone, but that, yeah, just like how quickly critics dropped her.
Yeah,
was incredible. Day.
I mean, one could argue that it's because they wanted to have these people get nominated and potentially win because they like these performers and not because of the actual movie in which they are performing or the performances they give in that movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, it always seemed pretty crazy to me to put Carey Mulligan above either Emma Stone or Lily Gladstone. Like that's third place. Okay. Like I think that it always felt like those two were up at the top. And then there was a potential spoiler that could come out of a pool of like 6 or 7 amazing actresses that are vying for those last 3 spots.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a little weird to think. I would think it's strange if they are just like, no, okay, goodbye. Does it end up that like there's some kind of last minute Netflix shift to May, December? Because that has gotten a little bit more heat to be like, okay, this is our top priority. And they start pushing, a Natalie Portman, Julianne Moore, and right. Charles Melton out in acting instead of the Maestro people. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I would assume no, because everyone loves Carey Mulligan, and I mean, I guess not everyone loves Bradley Cooper because he doesn't win an Academy Award, but he's a really big star, and people want to see him be successful. So I would assume Netflix wants to keep working with him. So I don't think that would actually happen, but yeah, I forget why I started making fun of Maestro. Oh, because it's not because Maestro is a villain. Really, it's the closest thing I have to a villain, but it's not a real villain. And so great if there's a shakeup, because it just means another really good movie is getting awarded somewhere. And that's nice. That said, I'm pretty good with if things did basically shake out this way, Lily Gladstone, Da'Vine Joy Randolph, Oppenheimer clustering around other things, and then it's Barbie, Oppenheimer, Poor Things, Killers of the Flower Moon, fighting around screenplay and below the line. Cool. Like, great. What a great year for the movies and for the Oscars. So we'll see if there's more shakeups beyond that. But I'm okay. I'm okay with that so far.
Well, yeah, we'll have to wait and see. I think for me, SAG has the biggest potential to shake up the acting races. Because oftentimes SAG sort of like zigs and zags in a way that's kind of confusing in terms of who they pick as the winners. Because I feel like, was it last year even where it was like a different Oscar nominee won each of the big acting precursors.
That may be right.
Yeah, like somebody, and that often happens where like one person wins. Like I think it might have been, maybe it was last year. Angela Bassett won Golden Globe. I want to say Kate Blanchett won SAG. Oh no, that's not true. It was Michelle Yeoh.
The four people who won SAG are the ones who won the Oscars. But at the time, it was weird that Brendan Fraser won and that Jamie Lee Curtis won. Like that was strange.
Yeah.
And Michelle Yeoh and Kate Blanchett have been kind of fighting it out, the whole time.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, it's possible that SAG zags, and that suddenly is like, oh, this is the new path to what the actual winners will look like. We don't know.
All right. Well, I think we've done a thorough breakdown of how this has happened and what the implications for the future might be. Are there any personal picks that you want to give a shout out to wrap up?
Oh, I mean, it's hard not to love that Boy and the Heron one, and I don't mean that to disrespect Spider-Verse. So, yeah, I think I have to go with that. And I will say, and I have watched Barbie multiple times since it showed up on Max, and so I do really like that. I don't mean to disrespect that either, but I really like that Poor Things won Best Musical or Comedy, because I love Poor Things even more than I love Barbie in this, as previously mentioned, stacked movie year. How about you? What was what was or were your favorite wins?
I mean, I was really happy about. I mean, this is not necessarily a win necessarily, or like just because of the win, but Cillian Murphy and the whole moment of like he had lipstick on his nose, and then Michelle Yeoh, I think, took a second to try to like tell him, or to like be like, "Do you want me to wipe it off?" Like, because her back is turned to the audience, and she's like, "There's something that's going on between the two of them." In fact, I've heard people mistakenly. I think this was Mike, and Oscar. They were like, "Did Michelle Yeoh kiss Cillian Murphy on the nose? Is that why he had the lipstick?" No. It was like I think she was trying to warn him that he had something on his nose. And then I think it was really endearing that he was like, "I'm just gonna leave it there. It's fine." So that might have been my favorite kind of like single like cute moment of the night. But in terms of win, honestly, I really love Anatomy of a Fall. And so as crestfallen as I was to be wrong about predicting Barbie to get screenplay, that actually probably is my favorite thing. Because I'm like, this is a real thing now. I feel much more secure about Anatomy of a Fall getting into Best Picture, which I was really worried about. And Justine Triet giving a shout out to, first of all, to Snoop. Gotta love that. Right. And then, but also, and I'm not gonna remember his name, but the young actor who plays the son in the movie. And then she gave just really good just shout outs. She was like the actor who plays the defense attorney. She was like the hottest attorney this side of the Alps or something like that. It was just like, it was really, her speeches were really spot on. And I was just I was very happy to see that film do well. I would have been even happier to see Past Lives also do that well, but I get that like maybe there wasn't room for both of them in these wins. But yeah, they had the Anatomy of a Fall for screenplay got me the most excited probably.
Yeah, I mean that's a great choice. I did want Past Lives to win at least one of those two, but Anatomy of a Fall was so good. So yeah, that's what, again, how lucky we are for such a good year in movies.
Yeah, because I would second all of the ones that you had too. Like, I love Poor Things. Hopefully we'll get to do a Poor Things review at some point. That would be really fun. And, Poor Things, Boy and the Heron. Yeah, very few complaints about the winners from the Golden Globes, which I can't say has always been true.
Yeah, I mean, again, like, overemphasizing it, but just the list of movies that won: Oppenheimer, Anatomy of a Fall, Barbie, Holdovers, Poor Things, Killers of the Flower Moon, The Boy and the Heron. Yeah. No,
hard to be mad about that.
Yeah. Flawless list.
All right. So thank you so much for helping me work through what the meaning of the Golden Globes was or could be, where can folks follow us? Where can they find us on the internet? And, if they have their own thoughts about the Golden Globes that they want to share, where can they do that?
Yeah, where could they share it? Well, as mentioned earlier, they can follow the podcast on all their major podcast feed locations. They can subscribe. They can review and rate the podcast. Leave a review. Leave a comment in the review. We would love to see it. That helps the visibility. That will get more people to hear us and join in the conversation. You can follow us on Instagram and Threads at the Long Take Review. You can shoot us an email if you feel like you don't want to do it in a social media sense or in a public review. The Long Take Review at gmail.com. We're open for business on emails as well. And now that we all have active Letterboxd accounts, I have mine. I'm actually up and running. And it's not just like a checklist for movies. I'm trying to actually log and review. So you can find me there at PT McNiff, and Jen can gives hers momentarily, and our other hosts are on there as well. We've been trying to tag all of our reviews starting in 2024 with the tag LTR Pod. So if you go to any of our pages and you look at any recent review, they will likely, or they should be tagged. If it's a movie, they should be tagged LTR Pod, and you can click through that and sort through viewing everyone who has posted it, and you will find movies dating back to Battleship Potemkin in 1925, all the way up through Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire from very late 2023, and a handful of movies in between that we have collectively watched in this first week of 2024, with maybe a few that snuck in at the end of 2023. So find us there. Follow us, any of our accounts, comment on our reviews. We would love to communicate with any and all of you out there.
Amazing. I have been afraid to log my first movie of the year because, and you'll hear it here first, listeners. The first movie technically was Chicken Run: Dawn of the Nugget.
Hey, it could be an Academy Award nominated movie. We don't know that. It's very possible.
It was fine. It's neither good nor bad. It just was. It was a Chicken Run movie. Which I love the original Chicken Run, so that's hard. That's hard for me to say.
Wow. But, I will just note the experience of actually trying to which you don't have to do, but I do feel like I want to play the game of like being like, I'll watch something, and then like I'm just going to immediately gut reaction, put a star on it, a star rating, and some sort of pithy 1 or 2 sentence comment under it. Looks very weird when I look at my profile and see that I gave the same rating to The Arrival of a Train at La Ciudad from 1897, a 45-second, snippet of film, the same rating as The Pacific, a 10-hour miniseries about World War II. Somehow those were both 3.5 stars. That's right. Apparently, once I was done with them.
Letterboxd can contain multitudes. It's fine.
What a weird thing.
You can find me on Letterboxd at Qui-Gon Jen. You can also find me on Instagram and Threads at Sopchockchai, SOPCHOCKCHAI. And try to avoid hot sushi, everybody. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. You can follow The Long Take Review on Substack at thelongtake.substack.com. Subscribe for free to receive new podcast episodes as well as written reviews of films with Oscar buzz and new films and series from pop franchises like Star Wars and Marvel.